Hi, I am Ashton Davis. I am a student of Human Growth and Development class, and this is my presentation of my adolescence essay. I am looking over at my essay while I read my presentation to you. That's what I'm looking at. I just need something to base it off of. So, I thought it'd be best to start off by reading the abstract. That way, of course, I don't have to read, every sentence of this 7-page essay. So, and of course, the abstract is supposed to get, anyways, give you a full summary of what this passage is about. So, I feel like this is going to start off with a good conversation point with us. So, let me just begin. My daughter, she's in the back in the living room asleep on the couch watching duck calls. So this is the best time I could thought to do this. Okay, so in this passage that focuses on the human growth and developmental stage of adolescence, the reader will have the opportunity to expand their range of knowledge on physical development, cognitive development, sexual maturation, and the role in establishing an individual's sense of identity. An individual who is in the developmental stage of adolescence undergo transitions such as hormonal growth, growth spurts, cognitive development, puberty, and obstacles in obtaining social acceptance. In this essay, the reader will observe excuse me with the pronunciation, Jean Piaget's description of the formal operational stage, Erik Erikson's description of the identity versus role confusion, James Marchia's categorization of the four social identities, and John Feeney's proposal of the three stages of ethnic identity. And then I have my keywords you will see on the presentation. Part 1 focuses on the physical and cognitive development and sexual maturation of the human growth and development of an individual in the adolescent stage. It talks about how the hormonal, physical, and cognitive growth that occurs during the human developmental stage of adolescence is known as the process of puberty, and puberty is huge. Lots of things happen, both physically, reproductively, obviously, and cognitively. Lots of neurons are going on. The synapses pruning is going on. The prefrontal cortex, the occipital lobe, the frontal lobe, everything's developing, some faster than the other, which is also hit in the passage as well. I believe it was the prefrontal lobe that develops much, what was it, much later than the occipital lobe, which is the view of things, and the preorbital is, that gives you more of an understanding, more of reasoning, less risk taking, and more acting mature like an adult, like a middle-aged adult. But that's talked about later on in the essays previously. Let's see. I talk about in the essay how the process of puberty is initiated by the HPG axis and by the hypothalamic neurons, about how the HPG axis lies dormant in the human body after the first 6 months after the birth has passed. And for the process of puberty to initiate, talk about how the HPG axis must reactivate in the human body with the hypothalamic neurons. Again, I'm sorry about my pronunciation. Neurons, as neurons increase the production of the gonadotropin releasing hormone. It's a lot. But in this passage you will see that I talk about the chemical reactions, which hormones are needed, which enzymes are needed, the development of the different lobes and parts of the brain, and the time frame that the developments take over. So that's what I cover really with the cognitive, the first part, with the chemicals and the puberty part of it. I talk about also the primary and secondary characteristics that occur during puberty. For example, the primary being the ones that directly affect the reproduction system and organs. And, oh, I'm sorry. Goodness, my bangs. Sorry, I cut them myself. And the secondary um, sexual qualities during puberty that are like um, hair growth, growth spurts, and I talk about the physical and negative effects it has on both males and females as they enter puberty, with females not really having many positive effects to go off of, but a few positive effects for males and negative effects for both. And some of them have the same effects as well. And I talk about those all in my passage. Let's see. I make sure I cite everything and page numbers. I save the page numbers for last. I learned that makes it easiest to make sure everything goes smoothly when I'm doing the APA format. It had been 8 years since I graduated college last with my bachelor's in forensics degree, so it had been a minute, but I was proud of myself for how well I've been doing on your essays. I'm sorry, that was a side note. Anyways, let me continue on with my passage if you don't mind. So, let's see. I talk about the major cognitive developments that take place during the adolescence process of puberty, which include metacognition. I'll talk about how that is the planning and thinking ahead, attention, organization, processing speed, and memory. I focus a little bit on Jean Piaget, the psychologist, and I talk about how he talks about the adolescent stage of human growth and development is in their formal operation. And I speak a lot about what the formal operation means, the ins and outs of it, the effects of it, all the in between. Let's see. For example, I said Paget, Jean, let's just call him Jean. He proposes that an individual who is in the formal operational stage of cognitive development form decisions based off of stage approach manner of problem solving that involves hypothetical thinking, quantitative thinking, abstract thinking, the newly developed manner of thinking called metacognition. And I talk about the definition of metacognition also in this passage. Let's see. Talk about David Elkind and how he was a psychologist who proposed a theory that an individual in their adolescent stage of human growth and development will undergo the cognitive development of that individual's egocentrism. So I talk about egocentrism and I talk about the ins and outs of that, the definition, the negative parts of it, the positive parts about it, how it affects the brain, the age it occurs, how it affects hormones, the ins and outs. I talk about that a lot. Let's see. I give the definition. Egocentrism is when an individual experiences a sense of standing before an imaginary audience who is watching and judging their every action and behavior. It's like a stage approach. During the stage of adolescence egocentrism, the individual may experience what is labeled as personal fable and invincibility fable. I give the definition of both of those. The definition of personal fable is the individual's belief in their own qualities. Definition of invisibility fable is an individual's belief that probabilistic circumstances do not apply to themselves. Let's see if there's anything else, in part one that needs to be highlighted that I haven't highlighted already. That's a little bit of everything from part one. I try to keep it just above the 500 limit on each. I know I've been really going above more. I hope I haven't been annoying with that. Once I start writing, I just keep writing. It's something I'm proud of. So part two, let's see. Part two is called Identity versus Role Confusion. I associate with Eric Erickson. Through these last handful of essays, I've learned about our friend John and Eric Erickson. And I try to remember a lot of the models from beforehand. And it's Sigmund Freud. He's hard to forget. But through these essays, I've really gotten to know a lot of Eric Erickson's theory, his different stages, his proposals, what they mean, how it affects, positive and negative, they're all in between. So let's see. Excuse me. Getting over having the flu. Okay, so I like to go over who the different psychologists are. I try to take an approach as if you are a reader who doesn't know anything about this and you're relying on my essay to learn about it correctly and factually. So I say that Erik Erikson is a psychologist who proposed a theory of psychosocial development that he stated could be categorized into 8 stages, which are trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, and ego, integrity versus despair. In this passage, we talk about, the identity versus role confusion, and that occurs during the adolescent stage of human growth and development. And I go into the details of, the identity versus role confusion. I go into the details of what it means, the effects of it, and let me just read a little bit of it, if you don't mind. So, when an individual is currently in the identity versus role confusion stage of Erikson's psychosocial theory, that individual asks themselves the 2 questions of who do I want to be and who am I? And so that's them trying to figure out their identity. It is important to understand that during the psychosocial stage of identity versus role confusion, the identity is not undergoing the process of formation, but is instead undergoing the developmental process. I talk about self-concept and self-esteem. Self-concept and self-esteem is being established during the psychosocial stage of identity versus role confusion. Let's see. Sorry, I had a grammar mistake. Self-concept is referred to as an individual who starts forming a future image of who they could be and what their occupation may be. So that's self-concept. I talk about that a lot. Let's see. Talk about is self-esteem. Self-esteem is based on an individual's self-concept and the social relations with other individuals that the individual in question has established. Let me go on to different points that I have hit. I'm sorry, I didn't realize we were already going on 12 minutes. I'm sorry. Talk about how the crisis in Erikson's stage of identity versus role confusion that is necessary to be met to positively move on to the next stage and not to be fixated in the stage in adulthood is a crisis that the individual needs to achieve a sense of identity. I talk about James Marcia, did I say that right? Who is a psychologist who proposed that human beings can be categorized into 4 separate identity statuses. The statuses, I'm not going to read them all to you. I'm sorry about the time limit already. The 4 identity statuses that he proposes are identity achievement, excuse me, identity moratorium, identity foreclosure, and identity diffusion. And I give in this passage, in this essay, the description of each particular 4. I then talk about how those 4 are calculated by the 2 concepts of exploration and commitment. Talking about the social identity of identity achievement is defined as having a high present commitment and a high present exploration. That's talking, I'm just giving the definitions of each one. I'll save that for you to read in the passage, but I give the definitions of all of them. Let's see. And then, lastly, I talk about other dimensions that various psychologists have proposed that morph in individual's identity which are religious identity, political identity, vocational identity, excuse me, ethnic identity, and gender identity. Let's see. And then I give the definitions of each identity and what each one specifically means in my essay. And that's it. So, yep, I will just be emailing this to you, emailing you my YouTube link, and I will also be submitting you my essay. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good day. And anyone else who watches this on YouTube, I hope this helped you a little bit with my journey into pre-nursing school as well. Bye. Thank you.